quite often a lot of companies have trust as one of their values. And for us, it's trust and respect, because trust is a feeling. I can't tell you to trust me because that's not how humans work. But respect is trust in action.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders of the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best team and company cultures in order to create the best games. Every episode brings actionable insight to improve your leadership, self-awareness, and emotional management skills. Because becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. So, are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. Don't just see the future, know the future with today's sponsor, Solsten. I've talked before about how Solsten is a necessary tool to compete in gaming these days. In short, Solsten empowers studios to build human-centric experiences by unlocking deep, psychological understanding of your most valuable audiences. At a time when we needed to know what our players would respond to, my team and I used Solsten and the product Navigator to identify key psychological insights across our audience for Plantopia. This prompted us to reshape our F2E, for example, promoting a stronger sense of productivity earlier on in the game. And this aligned with our audience's desire for empowerment and accomplishment, resulting in higher F2E completion rates and longer sessions. Solsten Player Intelligence Platform enables studios to unlock the full potential of their games and minimize risks across every stage of the development cycle. Visit go.solsten.io that you can find in the show notes for a demo. Mention Rise and Play and receive a free feature, theme, and art style study included with your Navigator purchase, a $20,000 value. Learn why EA, Supercell, Wooga, and more use Solsten to create the best human-centric gaming experiences possible. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play, and today I have with me Harinder Sangha. She has 20 years in tech and 16 years in the gaming industry. That's quite amazing. I love to meet other women executives in gaming with such a long history. 10 years of those were building successful studios with a great culture. And she also sits on the advisory board of Women in Games and is a board member of Yuki. So now Harinder is running a new studio as the COO. And before, she was an award-winning studio leader who helped form Sega, Hardlight, and Sumo Leamington. And today, what we will talk about is the new studio she has formed with other co-founders, the team and the leaders behind the Forza Horizon series, and who are forming now a new AAA game studio in Leamington Spa called Maverick Games. Welcome, Harinder. How are you today?
I'm good, Sophie. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Just back from Easter break, so I'm super chill, super relaxed.
Yeah. It's the first thing I'm doing after Easter, so I'm very relaxed.
Yeah, that's perfect then for a conversation today. I'm really always passionate and fascinated with how new studios are formed, new companies, and it's quite difficult to build a new studio, raise funds and so on, and especially also a new AAA studio, which I'm less familiar with, coming more from mobile. And I have been following a lot on LinkedIn as well, your culture, your principles, and the way you wanted to approach the studio from the beginning with a team of co-founders, building really an environment of freedom and autonomy and putting people first. And this is what I'm really curious about. So let me start maybe with how and when the company was formed and who were part of it and how did you get into it to be the CEO now?
So last year, I had a mutual friend that suggested that I meet with somebody. That person was Mike Brown, who is our creative director and who Maverick has been built all around. He's not somebody that I'd met before. And the idea was really from him to create Maverick. And what he knows he could do, obviously, Forza Horizon being an amazing game, obviously very much a console selling game. He knew that he could create a world-class game. And he asked me to join him on that journey to create a world-class studio to wrap around that world-class game in lots of ways. The rest of the leadership team, they were all part of the Forza Horizon leadership team, as well as Ben Penrose, who was from Shark Mob, who's our art director. And those guys have all worked together before, which is quite nice. I'm sure you know this, Sophie, actually. When you're starting a new studio, one of the most difficult things to get right and get working is that leadership team. But starting with that team that have already bonded and working together so well and can bounce off each other, it's just made such a difference from anything that I've previously done as well, because you can see that starting to bond. You can see the team working together. You can see how this is all going to kind of flourish off the back of that and the kind of team that we then want to build around them.
Great. So how many are you in total as part of a leadership of co-founders as you started?
So there's 7 of us.
Okay, 7. Not usual that I hear of a team of so many co-founders for a new studio, but all they have experience focusing first on the foundation of a leadership team, the fact that they have went through several iterations, storming, conflicts, etc., to really work well together. It's definitely an advantage, and having clear roles and responsibilities. So how did you define this at the beginning when 7 people, who would do what, who would be responsible for what, even decision making, if it's something you can share? I'm really curious about this, because anything you'll do going forward is based on how much you are clear about who does what from that team.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people have fallen into roles that they had before. And it was very obvious who would be doing what. And then I suppose that was why bringing me in as that missing part from that team was important to them. When you're a startup, you're wearing multiple hats anyway. There's lots of things, and it's a case of just all jumping in and doing what needs to be done. And we have been doing that. We've been supporting each other. It's a really nice dynamic between us all as well. So as soon as we launched, we were really lucky because we had lots of applications straight away for us. So it, for me, was supporting the team around making sure we're not being overwhelmed as well, because actually with the amount of applications we had, it was a lot for each hiring manager to go through, but we need to get through them at the right speed. We also wanted to send back personal feedback to people as well, to make sure that if someone's gone to the effort to apply for us, full respect to the entire team, they wanted to send personal feedback for why we wouldn't be moving forward with them if that was the case, and maybe to apply later on. But that also takes a lot of time to do that. So when you're starting, you're just building the team in lots of ways. And then you've got the added dynamic, because when people start to arrive, then we've got people that we need to look after. So you're looking after your team. And then we're trying to work on our project as well. So each one of those things is hard work on their own. When you're trying to do all 3 together, it can be quite difficult. So what we've been trying to work on is making sure we do things at the right time to make sure that it doesn't come to a point where anything's a burden. We want it to feel organic. We want people to enjoy working, including the leadership team. If the leadership team lose motivation because they're feeling like they're not doing what they enjoy, then it can start to demotivate them. So we've got to make sure we keep on top of that.
With 7 people with a history, you have a bit of a human puzzle where, of course, you want to make sure everyone is using at best their strengths, skills, and also motivated to do the work, but also doing the right thing, right? For an early stage company where you can have a temptation to start to build quickly, but then if you have no clarity on how you want to do things, which intention, and I really like that you do spend time deliberately on how you treat candidates like are applying and who are not accepted, maybe for later. Many startups, they go really well with this, no, and they hire the first ones with the best credential and so on. And it has consequences in the long term. So the fact that you think of sustainability, which is a hard balance to find, especially for a startup where the goal is to survive, to say, of the nature of a startup, you're also factoring in how do we make it sustainable. So my follow-up question is, as you join as well, what is your role as the COO? What is really your focus? What has been your task since you joined and things you are taking care of?
I suppose my first task was actually trying to make sure that we continue to work well together. Because actually what can quite often happen is when you come from a large organisation versus a startup, it's very different, and not everybody works well in that. And you're almost coaching people to work in that right way as well, because it can be so different. And also, not everybody enjoys it. So actually making sure that experience of what I've had in the past, that we can use that to the advantage of making sure that everybody stays on track. So very much it's about supporting the leadership team. making sure that they are where they want to be as well, because everybody has a vision of where they want to be with their team and how quickly we want to recruit. I've also been very much part of that recruitment process. I always do that final interview with everybody, all disciplines, and it's that conversation, it's that culture check, I suppose, to make sure that person's going to fit within our team. But equally, it's selling us to the candidate as well. It's a two-way. It's not just about assuming that they're going to accept. We need to be on top of our game. There is a lot of great studios out there, a lot of established studios where people are happy as well. It's explaining about who we are, what we are, and why we exist. I think that's really important. So it's even talking about the kind of things that we don't want to be as well. I think that's sometimes even more important, because explaining that means that we know what good looks like. We know what the perfect can look like, and we can talk about that. We don't want a studio where egos rule. We don't want a studio where the loudest voice becomes the voice, because quite often the loudest voice is the voice that we shouldn't be listening to. So that has taken a lot of my time, and we've got a studio space. So we've already got an office, which is great. I've already got an administrator, and then I've got an engagement manager who's starting very soon. And that to me is a really important role, because I think it may feel like a luxury to have that as a startup. It's all about how do we make sure our onboarding is the best it can be. Even, 3 months into our journey already now, I'm already thinking about retention, because whilst we bring people in, we need to make sure we look after our people. That's really important. When we say we want to be different, this is how we want to be different. We want to make sure that at every point, people feel part of the Maverick journey and what that means to them, and how we can make sure that they know where they are. And being transparent, is really important. And I really want, as soon as somebody joins, that we start to map out how we have a probation period, which is, 3 months, understanding for that candidate to understand what it feels like and what that 3 months looks like and what good looks like for passing probation, and then what we do after that to make sure. So what does it feel like? For me, I quite often refer back to, how does it feel? Because if we're doing something and the outcome for the person that we're doing it for, they don't feel the way that we expect them or want them to feel, then why are we doing it? We need to kind of go back and start thinking about. So for me, the engagement manager role is very much about, from the very first moment a CV hits our recruitment portal, all the way to kind of mapping out how we want somebody to feel once they've been on that Maverick journey for 2 years. How do they feel? Right? People are part of the industry because this is their hobby. This is what they would be choosing to do, even if they weren't at work. So we're really fortunate because everybody brings that passion, everybody brings that energy straight away. And unfortunately, certainly what I've seen in the past is a lot of companies, they almost rinse that passion out of people by exploiting that passion in lots of ways. And that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is starting at that level where, your energy level is at a certain point and your passion is at a certain point. And we just want to keep scaling that. We want to make sure that people understand where they are, and we're honest and clear about what that journey starts to look like at every point, every point that matters. I just feel like people will be on that journey with us. And equally understanding as well for everybody is, it's okay if people take what they've got with us, they take it with both hands and they learn, and then they step off that journey because it's right for them. That's okay. That's okay for that to happen. They go with our blessing, and, for them to know that the door's always open if whatever they go to do doesn't work out. If they go because they hate it, I can do something about that. That's not an acceptable reason. We can do something. And it's making sure that we make that right for people. Would love to change the word because we're very maverick in our approach in lots of ways, but we can't do that. But what we can do is make sure our impact on the industry is good, and we leave the industry in a better place because we existed. And that's my overall ambition and passion, is that our impact on the industry is only good.
The last sentence I heard almost like the purpose of your company, or at least for you being in this industry, and the purpose again behind what is the company and the impact on people in the industry. So a few points of reflection of what you've shared. There's a shift with some people who have influence experience like you, have a vision of how we think it could be, a bit more respectful workplace, trying to nurture the passion and not exploit it, like you said. So I'm really glad to hear that you have your own initiative in your own field. And that's why Rise and Play exists as well. Like, I wanted to see how many we were, and we are quite many. And it's about being patient of building those foundation and time will show the result. One tactical part that I found really interesting, what you call engagement manager, and post-acquisition after prestation, and also restructuring the company, changing what I used to call office management to employee experience management. But the way I thought about it, like we are designers at the end of the day, like we design experiences for players. Why can't we design as well experience for our employees? And a part of the engagement, you talk about retention, onboarding. It's the same conversation we have when we think about the game, right? So how did you get the reference or inspiration of an engagement manager? Or how did you come up with this idea? And what is the kind of profile of person to do this role?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's common in tech. It certainly should be. I think a lot of our people, they do what they do because they care about it, and sometimes forget about themselves along the way. And I've seen where somebody goes from being a really, really good senior and then goes into a lead role, and they're a terrible lead because they've been promoted in the wrong way, and nobody's coached them, nobody's helped them on that journey to know that it's okay not to be a lead. Mm-hmm. It's okay if that's not your passion, it's okay, and kind of explaining that principal path and understanding. So I think that's why it needs to exist in lots of ways, so that path is already there so that they're looked after. How did I come about it? I suppose it's come from being in the industry for so long in lots of ways and seeing a role that's been missing. And I think you're right. Quite often it is the office manager that picks this up. But I think there is a lot of office managers out there that are called office manager, which is almost, and this is no disrespect to what an office manager does, but it almost, I think it belittles what they do because they have such an impact on that studio. Mm-hmm. There's so much more than that. I think it's splitting out the role of facilities and engagement. There's a lot of work to be done with making sure that all of the facilities are in place for our people. And I think making it just one person's role can be quite overbearing sometimes. I think it's too much. And sometimes you can get somebody that does care just about the people, and the facility side can start to slip. And I understand that. And then vice versa. So splitting the roles into two, just make sure that both things can be looked after. And it doesn't become too overwhelming for that one person, because quite often that person is a woman as well, because it has that nurturing side in lots of ways. We as women, quite often, we take the burden of more than we should sometimes in the studios. I'm mindful of not doing that to other people in lots of ways. So making sure that we have, these are two really nice roles. So let's split them out. We're looking after both in the way that I do. So very much like I say, so for me, it's that concierge service and the facility side of things. And then it's about the engagement and making sure we get that right. I mean, the two work hand in hand with each other.
Yes.
They work really closely. But for me, I just see it as two very different roles.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But in the end, it's, the same umbrella of the overall experience of people, in your studio. So it starts from hiring and how you present yourself. So that's also my last part I wanted to spend some time on, about your culture, your values, principles, even the name Maverick Games. And since you are 7 people, it's a challenge by itself to always align over time. I'm sure you know about this, as your main mission is to make sure let's go in the same direction. How could you describe your culture, and what are the tools you work with to make sure you always come back to those set of principles, that you do the right thing for your company and with what you agreed on initially?
I'll start with telling you about our name. So Mike, as the founder, he, in some of his past reviews, he'd actually been referred to as being quite maverick, but not in a positive way, I suppose. So that's where the name came from. And I remember when he first mentioned to me that it was going to be called Maverick, and I was like, oh, that's very masculine. It's actually what I thought to start with. But then actually, when I started looking more into what Maverick meant, it is about being quite rebellious. It is about changing things. It is about flipping the norm, I suppose, in lots of ways. And I think that very much defines what we are. That's who we are. It isn't just accepting, just because everybody in the industry is doing something, it doesn't mean we need to do it. Things that we've already done, like with our salary transparencies. Certainly from all the studios that I looked at when I researched this, I couldn't see a single one that was actually had any salary transparency on their job descriptions. And for me, that was something that we could make a really early decision on, because it feels right. And it goes back to being transparent. So as soon as we had job descriptions going out when we started, we just had speculative, and then we added in actual jobs that we were looking for. I think this is where it makes decision making with all of us really interesting, because when we brought it to the group and we talked about it, the only conversation was around, is it going to stop some people applying? And that was the only reason. And once we got through that, it was a really easy decision, and it was a unanimous, we need to do this. Doing it really early on means that it holds our hiring managers accountable. We can't have a discrepancy. We don't have anybody that's paid less than the counterpart that's doing the same role. And that's something that's really important to me. We have some very core principles that are the same for all of us. We all think differently. And that's really good, because actually, if we all thought the same, there's no point us all being at that table. Whereas actually, we all challenge each other, and we're happy to challenge each other. And that's something that we need to make sure we maintain. Because if we all think differently and we're challenging each other with the best intent, because all of us want Maverick to be the best place to work, and we want the best games. And if we're doing that, it always means that we're going to get to the right decision, because we're going to throw in different things. And if we're listening to each other's opinions, and because we all come from different walks of life, it just always means that we're going to be very much focused on the right outcome always. And I've seen that already. I've seen that in the way that we've approached things. So that's been really refreshing in lots of ways. It's positive conflict to say we're not all thinking the same. We're really clear about what that end goal needs to be. And then we get out of the way of the people in our team. And we've been so fortunate with the people that we've already brought in. I almost pinch myself on how lucky we've been already. We just need to let them come in and do the job that we've already promised them. Because quite often you can be really excited about going to work somewhere, and you arrive and it's not quite what it was sold to you as. So making sure that we maintain our promise to our people. And that's about giving them that autonomy and getting out of the way and letting them do the job that they love doing. And if we need to course correct, it's about being honest. It's really about being honest about that. So quite often, a lot of companies have trust as one of their values. And for us, it's trust and respect, because trust is a feeling. I can't tell you to trust me, because that's not how humans work. But respect is trust in action. We have respect amongst each other, which means that, we can all have an opinion. We want people to take risks. We want people to be honest. We want people to talk to us. And that's how we do that. That's respect. If people just don't feel like they can have a voice, I think that's where problems start. And what I've done in the past is spend time with our leads as our leads are onboarding, because leads are the future of our students. So we need to make sure we nurture them. We need to make sure that they understand who we are and why we are, and understand our culture, because they are the ambassadors of our culture. We can't, unfortunately, spend that time like we are now with everybody. So it's making sure that we do that now, so that scales as well. I have monthly one-to-ones with all of the leads, and that we also make sure that the leads respect each other and have time to, it's almost co-coaching, so that they can learn from each other, because every lead comes with different experience, and there's so much that they can learn from each other, and they just scale that down. They scale that to all of their team. Ideally, we're trying to work on nobody has more than 5 direct reports. And that's really so that we can make sure everybody gets the support that they need, and that they feel like they're part of that Maverick journey. I don't believe a flat structure works, because the loudest voice becomes the voice. As I say, that's quite often the voice that we shouldn't be listening to. So we have a structure in place, and that's, as I say, no more than 5 direct reports. But that structure and that org chart, it's never a barrier. It's not a barrier to who you can speak to. I think that's really important. Anybody on there can go and speak to anybody, and nobody will be offended by that. And it's building that as part of our culture, for people to understand that anybody can come and speak to me or Mike or any of the leadership team, no matter where you sit in that org chart. And nobody's going to feel offended by that, because we have that very transparent and respect, where we understand that's okay to do that. We want people to come and grow with us. It's important to who we are. It's ensuring that they feel like they're part of something special. And we do believe we have something special. And I think the team that we already have in place, we're up to 30 plus people already. And they're great. They're really good. And we have, just by demonstrating, by having females already within our team and showing that we have a very diverse team already. We have 35% females already, and hopefully we'll keep attracting the right women to come and work with us. We have several people of colour part of our team, and there is a place for everybody. You're not going to be judged because of any marginalised reason, you are not going to be judged. There is a place for you, because that is what's going to create the right game at the end of the day, is if we have lots of different voices from lots of people, lots of different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Point of reflection on what you shared as well. We are quite on a similar journey, and everything that you're sharing is really familiar with my own focus right now. I fully agree with focus on growing the future leaders of your company, or the right time to invest, and the focus, like, because in the end, the point of influence for many other people like team, and keeping limitation in the number of reports, because then you can have really the attention, to your team and your people. So it's really nice to hear as well. You came to similar conclusion. It's those things that get kind of out of the way when you start a startup. It's like, well, we take care of it later. And then you end up with many young leaders who have never learned, and creating this environment where leads can learn from each other, like having solid foundation from the top, and then it trickles down really in a healthy way, sustainable way to the rest of the company, especially in terms of culture. Glad to hear as well that you managed to bring different dimensions of diversity to your team and leadership team. It is a challenge overall, because all the important decision that can have an impact on the future of a company culture is a lot on the leadership level. And I have found really hard to find bringing more, especially women, in the leadership team. And this cannot happen coincidentally. You cannot go out there and let's recruit and then let's see who comes. And then you end up with a lot of male applications. And it's just one dimension. I'm focusing here more on the gender as a start. But of course, we have a dimension of ethnicity and background and so on. How are you approaching this question of diversity? Are you deliberate about it, or it's thanks to your branding and you being also a public figure that thankfully you managed to get those statistics okay? What have been your actions?
So been really lucky, actually, because already part of the leadership team is our UI UX director, Ellie Marshall, which is great because she is also an inspiring woman that others can look up to. And we haven't gone out there per se to say with a D&I strategy. It's very much we're showing it, I suppose, in the fact that we already have women in our leadership team. I have a lot of women that have always reached out to me because if they're struggling where they are, not necessarily, even if they're looking for a job, it's very much about feeling that when they need somebody to talk to, when things aren't going so well, quite often I do get women that reach out to me. And a lot of those women who have been really happy where they are, to be honest. And there's been quite a few that have said, I'm really happy where I am, but you guys have really intrigued me. So that's been really great. And I wish I could employ all of them already that have reached out to me. But eventually we'll get to you once we start to scale a little bit more. But I think it's just happened very organically for us. And you're right, it is really hard. It's hard to get everything right from all of those marginalised groups. But if we're just talking about gender, and that is something that's really important to me, because when I joined the industry, there was barely a woman in sight, to be honest, and seeing the change that we already have is great, but there is still so much work to be done. Just what's in the press at the minute with the outcome of GDC, there is so much work that we still need to do to create a place where women feel safe. It's being mindful about everybody that we bring part of that team, male or female, non-binary, it doesn't matter. Anybody that's part of that team needs to make everybody feel like they belong. If there was ever an issue, we would deal with it very quickly, I suppose. So it's been really clear about that. And quite often in our interview process, I don't know whether you have this, Sophie, where women will ask, what would you do if there was a problem here, like there has been in other companies? And we just need to be really clear about that. We have a zero tolerance policy about anybody that damages our place of belonging. That is non-negotiable. We've been really lucky, as I say, it's happened very organically. In lots of ways, my ambition is not needing to have a diversity focus group. It just happens and everybody feels like this is somewhere where they're not judged.
Yeah, and it's great that you managed to build this from the beginning. And I would say we are trying to, do our best, and there's not a clear answer to this. Have been thinking a lot about it. And first is walk the talk, right? Show who you are and what people are really looking for, no matter what the gender or the background. Is really, like you said, sense of belonging, that you're actually walking the talk, that you create the place, and there are consequences if there are people who come in and are not respecting those rules. Maybe it's a hard word that you've created to create safety, the safety of the environment, this place of belonging. And at the end of the day, that's the foundation of the diverse place as well. There's inclusivity, right? You're accepted and so on, you're understood, and differences are not punished. We will stop on that last point. I'm sure there's more to talk about. But yeah, thanks a lot, Harinder, for all the things you shared today. Really very practical things that you thought of, which is again unusual for a startup where usually it's let's build our first game and let's see what happens. It's you reverse kind of a bit the process. Well, let's start first who we are, setting up an office, creating the team, the staff to help people on board, do things sustainable because you are here for the long term. And I think that's a great practice that I hope others will take as starting the company as well.
Thank you for inviting me, Sophie. I've enjoyed today. It's been good.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am trying to grow a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. So if you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. Also, please don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss out on future content. Every episode is packed with actionable insights that will help you improve your leadership skills now. And if you are interested in learning more on the topics that we discussed today, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, and there you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership. So, have a great week, and until the next time,